Hello, folks. Welcome to our session, A Practical Approach for a Zero Trust Program. This is our session in the Cloud Security Alliance's 2025 Zero Trust Summit. And Jerry and I are going to be talking about a framework and an approach that we think is really helpful to bring enterprises forward with the guidance they need to give value to the business from a security and a business perspective as quickly as possible. So I'm Jason Garvis. I'm founder and CEO at Numberline Security. And I'm also co-chair of the Zero Trust Working Group here at the Cloud Security Alliance and co-author of the book Zero Trust Security and Enterprise Guide. And my counterpart, Jerry, please introduce yourself.
Pretty much the same credentials from that perspective. Co-founder and CTO at Numberline Security, also a CSA co-chair with the Zero Trust Working Group, also co-author of Zero Trust Security and Enterprise Guide. I've been working with Jason for a number of years. And as he said, we really enjoy working with customers, giving them the practical approach and really a quick go-to-market strategy to do some of the principles that we talk about with Zero Trust.
Jerry and I are, I would say, very much grounded in helping enterprises turn this really effective strategy, Zero Trust, into the ground reality of delivering concrete results to the business. And we've written about this in our book. We try to bring that perspective through our leadership at the Zero Trust Working Group here at the CSA. And we definitely bring that in the types of consulting work that we do with our enterprise customers across financial services, retail. We work with government entities who work with higher education. We have a real bias toward action and delivering concrete results. And that's really the whole philosophy we bring in our approach. And that what we're talking about is, okay, the Zero Trust is a terrific strategy. It encompasses and encapsulates all of these best practices around information security that we as an industry have developed over 25 years. Okay, how does that actually help me move forward as an enterprise? And I think we've certainly seen some challenges around this, and I would say a very common set of questions from enterprises.
Keeping in mind that Zero Trust is not a technology, it's not a specific solution, it truly is a strategy. There's not a one way to do this. There's a lot of ways to do this, and there's a lot of ways to go about this. And every enterprise can do it their own way. It's a very unique way. They have a unique way of doing it. Every organization is different. Every way to approach this can be different. But the key element to that is while everyone is a little different, it's certainly to have a structured approach, a program to actually, as Jason said, to create a path forward to effectively deploy the principles of a Zero Trust program or strategy is critical. So regardless of what you're trying to secure, your business assets, we'll get into that a little bit later, the structure is what makes it effective. And Jason and I really spent a lot of time, as he said, focusing on let's do very precise steps to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, and I think there's clearly a lot of commonality around Zero Trust and Zero Trust principles. And when we say that each enterprise is unique, what we really mean is everyone is going to have a different combination of technology, IT technology, security technology. They're going to have different priorities. They're going to have different dynamics to the business, different needs that the business is imposing on them. And they're going to be at a different starting point in terms of just their overall maturity across these different functional areas. And there's, of course, a lot of commonality. We'll talk about this structure and a common way of approaching it that provides very reliable set of steps that enterprises can use to take their protect surfaces and ultimately define these much more effective access policies around them. And that's what the whole initiative is about, right? When we talk about a bias toward concrete steps and concrete activities, what we really mean is getting these new access policies that utilize modern capabilities in your environment, deploying them and let users accessing these protect surfaces in a better way while improving security. So let's get our enterprises away from being lost at sea, and we'll give them the roadmap and we'll give them the structure and talk about this. So we start off in our mind this notion of blueprint, and the idea of the blueprint is that it's not a fixed set of steps, but it's a way of building on these different phases and having deep conversations, in your organization to get yourself ready, and then to, in a very stepwise fashion, get you there. So let's just talk about, an assessment and why that's, Jerry. Why do we think that having a, let's call it formal or structured assessment is so important before you dive in and actually start with your initiative?
Yeah, at the end of the day, right, before you move forward, you need to know where you are. It's like looking at a map, right? If you look at an analogy of a map, in order to get somewhere, you have to say, you see the little pin that says you are here. That's the purpose of an assessment, right? Is to really look at that. You are here. Here's the things that you're doing. Now let's talk about how to move forward. So really that assessment is to drive, is the organization ready to do this? What are you trying to do? And then through the formalized assessment, now you can say, here's my pin, here I am on the map. Let's move forward.
Right. And the two parts of the assessment are the organizational readiness and the zero trust maturity. And they're both really important. They talk about very different things. Clearly, the zero trust maturity assessment, now you can do this based on the CISA zero trust model. You can do it based on an enhanced model like we've created built on the CISA model. Or you can use a different model entirely. It's going to be your choice. The key is that you have as an objective as possible and holistic view across the different areas, right? If we think about the CISA pillars of identity and device and network applications and workloads and data, and then the very important cross-cutting ones of visibility and analytics, automation, orchestration, and governance. As an objective view of where you are across those is a really important foundation. So you simply know, hey, we're pretty good over here at this area. So that's going to be a good foundation for us to build on. And we're immature over here because we haven't invested in it. That's not going to be a foundation to build on, but it is going to be something to look at. How do we, step by step, improve our maturity over there? The organizational readiness is a very different conversation. We think is really important. It's a simple series of questions to help understand, is your organization, ready and gung ho for this, or do they often lag behind in adopting new technology, or are they resistant to change? Do you have the backing and the budget to do this, or is it something that you're going to have to justify? And what's going on in the business? Are there things that are changing? Are there mergers and acquisitions, or the shift to cloud? Are there investments and expansions to new geographies or new market segments? All of those things are really important factors to have a conversation about, because that's going to impact where you are and defining where you want to go. So let's talk about the where you want to go step, which is really creating a strategy for zero trust. And we really view this as two components. First is creating the vision. Okay, what is your organization going to look like in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years when you embrace and are really cooking with your zero trust initiative? And how do you get there practically? What does your zero trust program look like in terms of a steering committee organization? How formal or informal is that going to be? What's the makeup for the balance between security and IT and other stakeholders there? Jerry, your thoughts on the strategy elements?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to use my map analogy. You know where you are. You know where you need to get to be. You see it on the map. You've got directions, but you've got to have a way to get there, right? And so this vision is really that path forward of this is where we want to get to. And sometimes it's, quite frankly, it is aspirational. You may have aspirational plans, and there may not be a timeline invested in this. You may say, well, I want to do this in the next 3 to 5 years. Or you may say, holistically, as an organization, we want to get to this very aspirational goal, and this is where we want to see. When we get there, I don't know, it might be a year, it might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, and that's okay. But you have to put the stake in the ground of where you want to get to, and I think it's really important to drive that. And then really that program definition is that it's great that you want to get there. Let's define how we're going to get there, right? And to have potentially a steering committee, a program council, a governance board, something that you add to potentially what you already have. You may already have change advisory boards, architectural review boards, all these things that do some of these elements, but bringing these elements under a single umbrella to say, this is how we want to get to improving our security with this zero trust strategy. And this is the program we're going to drive that. So having that definition to execute on the vision, very critical. And I think it's something that every organization needs to do. One thing I'll say is Jason and I don't necessarily tell every organization, hey, go create a whole new committee because we don't want to add more work, right? In some cases, that might be the case. In other cases, it could be go add it to something you're already doing. A GRC board or a governance risk and compliance board is a great place to add something like this because it fits right into their structure. It could be a component of that. But it's important to remember that you need to have some sort of steering committee in place to support it, regardless of where it sits in the organization.
Yeah, and these two things in here, you can see the thread between the vision of the program definition and the organizational readiness and the maturity assessment. So if you think about the vision, clearly you need to have an objective understanding of where you are today to create your vision, because through that set of conversations and discussions around doing the maturity assessment, things are going to come out of that around, hey, we have all this technical debt over here, but we have a master plan to take our applications and move them off of legacy architectures and to move them up into cloud native types of applications. And we're doing a POC around that right now, but that's our strategic plan. Or we are just at the beginning of adopting new cloud-based identity system and moving off of a legacy system, for example. Those things are all tied into and necessary to have get that clear picture before you can create the vision. And likewise, the organizational readiness is very much going to impact the program definition. If you haven't thought through and had those conversations internally around where are you just curious about zero trust? Are you going to be at the case where you need to do a lot of evangelism, or maybe you're an organization or a government agency where you have a mandate to do zero trust? Very different type of conversation around, okay, what should your program committee, your program structure look like? Is it going to be super formal because that's the way your organization operates? Is it going to be informal? Is it going to be very visible by design to the business? Or is it going to be more security focused with less impact or less visibility on the business? There's no wrong answers there. I guess the only wrong answer is not to think about this and make a conscious decision. And we've seen this before, right, Jerry? We've seen organizations where they jump right to the technology and the implementation, and there's no thought to why you're using a certain technology a certain way. That ties into the organizational readiness and the maturity assessment and the creation of a vision and a program definition.
Yeah, and far too often we see, organizations, they'll jump into a technology and they'll say, oh, we're doing this and this is wonderful. And then there's a much bigger conversation that you could have that ultimately drives better results, better ROI on the back end, but you're not going to see that immediately if you're just jumping immediately into a technology that you may see some benefits out of that, but you're not going to get the big picture. And that's really where this organizational readiness, the maturity, the vision, and the program definition come in and solidify where am I trying to get to based on where I'm at.
Jerry and I love security technology as much as anyone, and it's a really fun part of it, but it shouldn't be the point of the spear, right? We have to do this stuff first in order to get your plan straight. So let's talk about the roadmap, Jerry.
I love the assessment. I love the strategy. The roadmap really brings all this together to align where you're going. If you keep in mind at the back end of this, what you're really trying to get to is building and deploying access policies across the organization. One of the things that this roadmap does is it takes a look at business assets, protects surfaces, and helps to build are the access policies associated with that. And driving both a top-down and a bottom-up process helps us bring these things together into an overall roadmap that allows you to do things like a technology process or a technology change or gaps in the technology that you need to deploy or you may or may not have, as well as potentially process changes, right? Bringing these together to say, oh, in order to deploy an access policy, I have to do these 5 steps, right? That's what this roadmap is really starting to drive towards. And you want to be able to get to that because that's the actionable plan that you get out of this. And the ability to say, I can now protect this specific protect surface within this business asset because I've applied this access policy. If we think about some things that John Kindervag has said is breaches only happen with allow policies. We ultimately are defining what those allow policies are so that you can only get there the way that we're defining it.
In many ways, the roadmap actually enabling access policies is the only reason that we're doing this, right? And you'll hear John Kinderbach talk about that a lot around access policies are the only reason we're doing this. And it's very true in that we have to recognize that improving our security maturity is terrific and it is something that we have to do. But if all we do is improve our maturity, but we don't actually turn this into real policies that end users experience and get enforced as they access these business assets, as they access these protect surfaces, then we're not doing our full job here. So we always bring with this approach, a bias toward, okay, how quickly can we incrementally and iteratively start to enforce access policies for these protect surfaces and these transaction flows? And as we do that, that's when you're starting to bring value to the business. You're improving the user experience, you're improving the security around those. And of course, in order to enforce these access policies, in order to utilize them for protect surfaces, you're going to very much need to look at what technology changes do I need, what process changes do I need to improve my security capabilities and therefore improve your security maturity. The approach that we take and we recommend taking is very much, both this bottom-up and the top-down approach, as Jerry mentioned. Right? There has to be a bottom-up analysis where you look at one protect surface at a time and what are its transaction flows, and therefore what are the access policies that we need to enforce for those. And those access policies require capabilities around them. Oh, I want to be able to enforce step-up authentication. I want to be able to enforce privileged session management, et cetera. Those are things that you look at your environment and you may or may not need to make changes to add those capabilities in order to turn on those policies. That bottom-up view also feeds into the higher level strategic roadmap of, okay, well, why are we doing this, right? This is in support of our data security strategy. This is in support of our, improving our governance, improving our compliance, making ourselves more business resilient, right? That top-down strategy part of it is directly derived from the elements that come out of the organizational readiness and the vision discussion. And the reason that they're so important is that you need to have that in order to have this higher level goal and picture to get support from the lines of business, to get support from your leadership. You remember what you're doing in Zero Trust, because it's holistic, is you are asking the organization to make changes around business processes, user access processes, even the way that custom internal applications are developed, et cetera. And in order to do that, you want to have the benefits, the carrot, not just the stick. This very much needs to be about, hey, we're doing this and we're making things better, but we're also securely enabling the business to adopt new technology. We're securely enabling good things to happen, not just preventing bad things from happening. And that's why it's important to have these steps, because now when you're building the roadmap, you've got a clear picture of how this program should be rolled out in your organization. You have a clear picture of the ways in which these really important business initiatives are going to be supported by your overall Zero Trust initiative.
No, absolutely. And I think all of this, and I'm going to touch on some things I think you mentioned as well, is having a true understanding of where you are. So it goes back to the Zero Trust maturity. When you take a look at that assessment, and you say, okay, these are the things I have, these are the things I can do. To this bottom-up approach to take a look at these protect surfaces within the business assets to determine, oh, wait a minute, if I need these 5 capabilities to implement an access policy, these capabilities are going to be based 100% on that Zero Trust maturity. When you take a look at that Zero Trust maturity, you say, oh, I don't have the ability to use example Jason said, to do step-up authentication. I can do sign-on authentication, I can do MFA, but I don't have the ability to do the step-up when I go to additional, maybe some sort of conditional access policy that says, oh, I need to now apply another level of MFA or multi-factor authentication to support what we're doing. But to be able to outline and define those capabilities within an access policy to get to a specific protect surface is very important. I think it's critical to understand when you do that, you're not only improving that specific protect surface within that business asset, but you now have the ability to say, oh, wait, I have these other policies for different protect surfaces that have that requirement. Now that I've implemented that or I've gone through that process, I can now, through this approach, expand my policy and expand my capabilities to be able to do this across the enterprise. So it's that iterative approach to say, yes, I've done it today, I've done it with this business assets and protect surface, but now because I've done that, I can enable other protect surfaces and other access policies so that ultimately I get more value of the technologies that I bought to support Zero Trust. So I think that's really important to understand as you start to build this out and think through, what does a roadmap look like?
Right, and there's definitely an art to deciding how to sequence things in the roadmap. And the key is to recognize that while you do approach things one protect surface at a time, that there's going to be a lot of commonality across those. And not every protect surface is the same, but when you're working on the access policy for your 10th web application protect surface, chances are it's going to look a lot like the previous 9, or maybe at least 3 or 4 of the previous 9. And that's going to make it a lot easier because very rapidly these things will fall into common patterns. So now you can accelerate the setup protect surfaces that get rolled into these access policies. And you can start to generalize things as well. And one of the things that many organizations face is a long tail of legacy custom applications or already deployed COTS applications or things like that. And none of them are obviously on day one part of the zero trust architecture. But the thing is that as you build out these design patterns and these common approaches, it becomes much easier to onboard these applications and systems one at a time. So we often encourage enterprises to set up a regular cadence that says, okay, every custom application has to get touched and refreshed once a year, for example. And as these things reach their refresh date, they automatically get moved over into the new platform and the new zero trust architecture. And it becomes an incremental type of thing where it's not a huge burden on the application owners, but every day, every week, as more applications go through that refresh, your organization gets better and better and more resilient. All right, let's talk about the execution phase, Jerry. We recognize that once an organization has built out this roadmap, that there's going to be different cadence and a different set of tools and teams that working on this, that actually are responsible for executing on this. Our perspective is, of course, standard IT, project management, resource planning is amazingly important there. The focus here that we think is important from a zero trust perspective is where you're now monitoring and maintaining the network and you're defining and measuring the metrics that show the progress that you have here. So we do recommend that. And of course, those metrics are things that you will build out throughout the whole process, especially in the vision and the organizational readiness conversation. Likewise, we do recommend having formal checkpoints. It's very easy to get lost or buried in the details of tool deployment and rollouts, because that's important stuff, and it's pretty cool and exciting when you roll out and onboard new technology. But it is important, we think, to have quarterly checkpoints where you kind of zoom out and say, okay, let's look at our vision, let's look at our high-level roadmap. How are we doing on this, and do we need to adjust things?
I think the vision is certainly something that you need to look at. It's going to be a somewhat of a living document, but it really depends on how you build that out. Jason, you and I often disagree on whether we should time bound this or we should leave it open. My opinion is it's aspirational. So quite frankly, if you come in and you say, oh, we want to do this complete modern authentication that's everyone's going to be able to do all the time, and it's very aspirational, then that's fantastic. It's not necessarily something that has to change. But if it is time bound, then you need to actually revise that and think through that, and it could become a living document. But my point then is if that's the case, your roadmap, in my opinion, becomes a living document. It's no longer this PowerPoint that's got a bunch of blocks on it that says, I've got to do these 5 things in these 5 quarters or these 7 quarters or this year and a half or whatever it is. It becomes a living document of the initiatives that you have to take, potentially projects you have to initiate. And then the checkpoints is really going back to evaluate, well, are we still on track, or do we have the ability to continue down the path that we're on to ultimately say, yes, this initiative is still on path, or no, we need to push that out 6 months, or, oh, by the way, these access policies, I think we can enable it because we just purchased another solution that enhances our gaps, that enhances our capabilities, that brings things forward, and it allows that to be an iterative process, and again, that living document. So I think it's critical to keep that in mind, that this is not a pure, oh, you have to go do this. It really is important to keep it as a living document.
I think we'll have to keep agreeing to disagree about the time-bound vision, much like pineapple on pizza, or perhaps ketchup on hot dogs, where we do disagree. All right, so we're almost out of time here. Let's kind of put a bow on this. So, we think that we've seen enterprises be very successful with zero trust by following this blueprint. We've seen enterprises that really struggle when they skip steps, or they try to jump to the implementation, or they don't tie what they're doing to the value to the business. And I think that last bit is really important, because when we see enterprises that are successful with this, it's where the security team recognizes that zero trust is not just about being a security strategy, but it's about engaging with the business as a catalyst for the security team to reach out to the business, meet them more than halfway, and really start to understand what is their incentive and what is important to the business, whether it's expanding to a new market or reducing costs or shifting up to the cloud or whatever it is. That security needs to be in support of that, because information security and really IT only exists to support the business and its mission. And security can't exist only to stop bad things from happening. Of course, that is a core mission that's never going to go away. But security, information security, needs to also recognize that in today's world, they exist to securely enable good things to happen. Jerry, any final comments before we run out of time?
Yeah, so I'll keep it relatively brief. Keeping in mind that zero trust is truly a strategy, or a lot of organizations that Jason and I work with, and we've seen this where the silos within IT, the identity, the network, the SOC operations, whatever they happen to be, tend to work in their space, app development, they all tend to work in their space, and they do a really good job in a lot of cases of doing the things that they do, and they do them well. I think it's important for us to remember that through these steps and through this blueprint process, it's really elevating all of those things into a formalized strategy across all those IT organizations. And as Jason said, to help them align these things to the business and align these things to get the business value out of that. And that's where we see a lot of value, to take away the silos and bring these things together and create an overarching zero trust strategy.
We offer a free organizational readiness survey, and you can see the QR code there, as well as a URL where you can get access to that. And this is a 4-question online survey that helps you start that first step of understanding your readiness, your level of formality, and anticipated business initiatives that you can help leverage. So we encourage you to try that out. Lots of information on our website about this. Jerry and I are also happy to connect with you on LinkedIn to continue the conversation, answer your questions, and follow up with you on this. We want to thank the Cloud Security Alliance, as always, and if you are interested in Zero Trust in general, we'd also encourage you to join the Zero Trust Working Group. We're always looking for volunteers and participants to help out. We got a lot of work to do in the industry. We haven't cracked this nut around Zero Trust and around information security, and the adversary is only getting more and more pervasive. Thank you.